Good afternoon. My second video presentation is still on the research question of the relationship between the age gap between student and teacher and the overall effectiveness of the teacher in the classroom. This first article, entitled Professor Gender, Age, and Hotness in Influencing College Students' Generation and Interpretation of Professor Ratings, that's a mouthful. That first one, it attacks the question at an angle, not necessarily evaluating the actual effectiveness of the teacher via student test scores or monitoring student attentiveness in class or anything of that sort. Instead, it goes to analyzing the perceived effectiveness via the student. So from the student point of view, how well do you think this professor is going to educate you? So a little background, this is largely based on students' use of the Rate My Professor website and other websites like it around the world. As someone who hasn't used one of these before, I was very surprised at how popular they were. Students reported that 76% of them, 76% of students reported using these websites, not only just like browsing, but to really compare professors and create their schedule for the upcoming semester. So students are using this, and they're using it in a pretty serious manner. So professors are concerned with potential sources of bias, and there are many. Professors, well, first of all, there isn't a way for the website to check to verify that you've actually interacted with a professor before rating them. So professors have reported being falsely rated by disgruntled students, disgruntled colleagues, students that have never taken their course. They've been rated for classes that they've never taught. So there are a lot of sources for bias out there. So the purpose for this was the purpose of this study was to investigate potential sources of bias influencing the ratings on the Rate My Professor website. So they had a few different hypotheses related to gender, age, and the hotness factors of this study. But the two that I was particularly interested are the two that relate to age. Hypothesis 3 states that the age difference would have, the age group of the professor would have a significant effect on their ratings. So they're predicting that professors perceived to be 35 or older versus those perceived to be 35 or under will have significant differences in how they're rated. And they also predicted that age and gender would interact. So we will probably see something along the lines of older female professors got the best ratings, or older male professors got the best ratings. Instead of the two variables working alone, they would be working together to produce some sort of significant effect. So the sample size was 230. They used 230 college students. All of them were psychology students. So they were either enrolled in introductory psychology or lifespan developmental psychology, those two courses during this study. That was completed via an online survey. So they were emailed a link, and when they opened the survey, they first answered some demographic questions about themselves. They rated a current professor of theirs, and then they were randomly assigned to view one of 4 bogus profiles, so fake professor profiles, that they were instructed to review it and then provide feedback on it. That feedback was in a 5-point Likert type scale where they had to anticipate actions of the professor in class. So based on the profile that they just reviewed, they would have to answer questions like, how likely is it that the professor would do this in class? And they would, the answers range from not very likely, extremely unlikely to extremely likely, and they would have to provide feedback in that way. So the 4 profiles that they were randomly assigned to view consisted of both male and female profiles, one with a red chili pepper and one without. Now, the chili pepper is the icon on the website that indicates hotness. Either just by looking at the icon, if the icon is there, the professor is considered hot. If the icon is missing, the professor is considered not. Now, that is actually, it was intended to be just an at-a-glance evaluation of their skills in the classroom. Just by looking at an icon, are they good or are they not good at teaching? But it actually has lost some of that meaning. Students have started to associate that with the physical attractiveness of the professor, and so it's kind of lost its way as an evaluation tool. So as far as the 4 bogus profiles, we had a hot male, a not hot male, a hot female, a not hot female, and all 4 profiles used the intentionally ambiguous name Alex Johnson. So whether they thought they were evaluating a male or female professor, they were just evaluating Professor Alex Johnson. So the findings revealed bias in favor of rating real female professors. So professors that they've actually interacted with when it comes time to rate them. If they were female professors, they tend to be pretty lenient, whereas online, if they're interpreting a profile, they tend to be pretty critical of them. As far as the male professors, there was bias against the real older male professors. So any male professors perceived to be 35 or older, and again, the students had no way of verifying that. They're just looking at a picture. Well, not looking at a picture, looking at the real person, but they didn't tell them how old their professor was. So when they think that they're evaluating a professor who is male and over 35 years of age, they're generally much more critical of them. Whereas online, there was no support for bias of male professor profiles when they're interpreting them online. And there was support for bias of the hot or not icon, and I predicted that as soon as they said that students were using it for physical attractiveness and not actual, teaching ability. But yeah, they were pretty biased. So they were generally very critical of those who did not have who were not, and pretty lenient on those who were considered hot. My next article was Teacher Characteristics and Student Performance, an analysis using hierarchical linear modeling. So this one actually does evaluate the actual effectiveness of the teacher via test scores, not only test scores of the student, but test scores of the teachers themselves. So let's get into this one. So as a premise, it's known that the school performance in the South African region is pretty poor, and they do know that based on the data that I'm about to get into in the next slide. And prior research is very confusing on this topic. A lot of conflicting results. There are basically lots of articles out there stating that they found positive and negative correlations between the teacher performance in a subject area and the student performance in a subject area. So there are lots of articles out there saying the better your teacher does the better your math teacher does on math tests, the better you'll do. And there are others that say the exact opposite. So it has been shown that teacher quality does positively correlate with student performance, but they do not know exactly which aspect of that is responsible. So they've got a broad idea and they're working out the details. They're trying to find out exactly what is it that makes you a quality teacher that, pays dividends as far as student performance. And so the purpose of this was to investigate whether teacher characteristics were significantly associated with student performance. So the way they did this was through the SACMEC-3 study, which was completed in 2007. So they did not actually go out and test students themselves. They used data that was already existing. So the SACMEC-3 study tested 9,038 sixth grade students in South Africa and 392 of their teachers. The subjects included reading, math, and health. So the students were tested in each of the subjects, and teachers took the health test and their subject area. So if you were a math teacher, you would take a health test and the math test. If you were a reading teacher, you would take the health test and the reading test. So the data was analyzed using hierarchical linear modeling. They did not describe too much about the details of that, and so neither will I, but it is a complicated statistical analysis in which they basically compare the student scores to the teacher scores and analyze them that way. The teacher characteristics that they were investigating for a relationship with student performance, there were a lot of them, but they all fell under the following categories. So the first one was demographic characteristics, so age, gender, things like that. Education and experience, so what kind of program did you graduate from? Effort characteristics, and this one was where I was a little skeptical. They used, one of the things they used for effort characteristics was how frequently teachers assessed their students in class. And so, like, how often were they testing the students? The logic behind that was that it was, more effort for teachers to test more often. And so those that, did test more often were seen to be putting forth more effort. I'm not sure if I agree with that as an evaluation of effort characteristics. And the last one, the last umbrella, was school and classroom characteristics. So all of the characteristics that they were investigating for a relationship fell under these 4 categories. And so in the findings, under the teacher demographics category, they found that gender had no effect on student performance, but age did. It was not a linear effect, so it wasn't, basically the youngest age group outperformed all 3 of the older age groups of teachers, and the 3 upper groups, so the 3 groups that were older than teachers aged 19 to 29, they performed very similarly. So there's something different about this, the youngest age group, whereas the older 3 age groups are performing very, very similarly to each other. Teacher education and experience, that did have a significant, a positive correlation with student performance. So what type of program you graduated from had an effect on the student performance. So basically, teachers who went through some sort of alternative teacher prep program versus teachers who got a university degree, the teachers who had a university degree had better student performance. Teacher effort had no effect, and the school and classroom characteristics had some effect. So SES, socioeconomic status, had a strong correlation to student performance in math. So the more affluent the family of the child, the better they were predicted to do in math. And class size also had a significant effect, but the effect size was very, very small. So and so, as we all know, as class size increases, the effectiveness decreases. So it was very small. They said that the effect of adding 1 student to 1 class was virtually negligible, but regardless, it was a significant effect. And so I hope you have enjoyed my second video presentation. P.S. I almost forgot to discuss the most interesting part of these findings. So the results under the first category in the findings for this article can be to a certain degree explained by the results in the second category. So the youngest age group of teachers were found to be the most effective. And so in recent years in that region, they have been mandating more teachers to get university degrees, and the university programs have been becoming more comprehensive. So I feel like the youngest age group outperforming the older age groups, especially when the effect wasn't linear. The older 3 age groups performed very similarly to each other, and then it seemed like the youngest group just blew them out of the water. I think we're seeing the products of these new, more comprehensive programs in recent years coming to fruition in the school programs. So now I hope you've enjoyed my second video presentation.